Welcome to the shops. I'm Mr. Abel. I'm going to teach you guys about the bandsaw today. Today we got a Laguna 14-inch bandsaw, and so we're going to go over all the major parts. So let's get things started. So first off, you may not want some notes, but we'll see how your teachers go with that. So starting with number one. What's the name of the tool? The tool is called the bandsaw. Second part, what is this tool used for? It's for making rip cuts, so long cuts down for narrowing your boards, for making oblong or unique cuts like curves, because you can twist and turn as you cut through this, or for resawing. So if we're trying to take a wide, fat chunk of board and cut a thin piece off of it. First important part is our power switch. Our power switch on this saw is located over here. Red for stop, green for go, and then this one also has an emergency stop button. So if anything catastrophic goes on, hit that button and you're set to go. But if in your shop none of these buttons work, you need to pull it back on and then start using those buttons to work. Next important part of the bandsaw is our table. All your materials should be flat on the table. Don't have it angled, don't set it up. Unless you have a jig specific for that, so that then you can adjust, but that's teacher specific on those ideas. Everything flat on the table. Next important part is our blade guard. Your blade guard should be about a 1/4 inch. What I have labeled on here is less than 1 finger gap. So if you have your material sitting on there, you're going to cut through less than a finger between it and your material. To adjust that blade guard, we have our adjustment knob on the side here. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, bring it up and bring it down. So that then bring your material up and then drop it back down to your material. Next important part is our blade overall. Depending on the size of your blade is what you can do with that saw. This saw has got a 1/4 inch blade, so this is one we use for cutting those curved lines. I also keep one at a 1/2 inch blade and one at 3/4 inch blade. That really wide 3/4 inch blade is the one that we use for resawing. So if you're using the fence on the table saw, make sure you slide it over on your measurement scale that we have right here. Slide it over, double check those measurements. Oh, squeaky this morning. And lock it in place. Then you can also lock the guard on how deep you want it to go onto your table. So always have your material supported with that fence. Lock everything in place. You can double check from your fence to your blade to make sure that you have things set up. So I'm not quite at 4 inches yet. So I would slide that just a bit more. Double check with what I got there. And you got your fence set up. With the bandsaw, since it runs in a continuous motion, it runs really smooth and rather silent. And so with it running constantly through there, you got to make sure that that blade is totally stopped. On the floor, we have a brake. That brake will engage and stop your blade. Make sure you have it turned off before you apply the brake, but always, before ever leaving a tool, make sure it's stopped motion and is turned off before cleaning up. So now to use the bandsaw. Before use, we got to set up a couple of things. First one off is that blade guard. So back to making sure your material's on your table. Raise the blade so that we get it so it's just that 1 finger width there. If you need a fence, adjust your fence, double check those measurements. All of this before we ever turn on the machine. I won't use a fence to make this cut. And then your PPE. So if you turn it on, you put it on. Safety glasses are required for all power tools in the shop. If you have your long flowing hair, make sure it's tied back behind your shoulders. And then any long sleeves are pulled up or any excessive jewelry is removed off. Any hoodie strings, any earbuds, all that stuff needs to be removed so that when you're leaning over, just like the long hair, it's not leaning out. So during use, we're going to make a couple of cuts for you, some of our most basic cuts. First thing about during use is always safety glasses must always be on. Then always have your hands about 3 inches away from the blade so that your fingers are never directly in the path of the blade. With them, keep them pushed to either side so that then you can slide your material through nice and smooth. So the first cut that we're going to make is some curved cut. So marking my cut on my wood, bring it down, and you always want to make sure that you're cutting on the trash side. if I'm making a detailed cut for that. Setting up my blade guard. My blade guard's already set previously to the height of material. Make sure my emergency stop is off. Starting with our curve cards. So we turned it on. Fingers on the material flat on our table. Bring it in. Save the line. Turn it off, then use the brake to stop that blade from spinning. There's your curved cut. Shelf detail. I don't know. So now we're going to do the second most common cut, a rip cut. A rip cut is where you're ripping the board. You're cutting it down to narrow the board. I want just a 4-inch section out of this board here. So I set up my fence, make sure it's locked in place. I double check with my measurements, make sure I've got it set up to 4 inches on my blade. Then, having my blade guard set, I bring this material over to that. But then always have a push stick at the ready, because if you have less than 3 inches, I know this is a 4-inch cut, but having my hand here, my hand's going to be closer than 3 inches on that side. Further on this side, I'm going to need a push stick to finish this off over here. So, get the blade started, material flat on the table, and begin my rip cut. Stop the machine, apply the brake, get the blade to stop spinning. That's my scrap. And here's my 4-inch piece. Okay. So after you finish cutting any of your material, your curve, your rip cut, make sure you clean up all your parts. Put your push stick away, clean up your scraps, any other debris that you have left over from your cut, so that then it's ready for the next student to use. After you've cleaned up all your scraps, make sure that the machine is fully off, that all your parts are away, and then lower that blade guard all the way down, because then there's no way that anybody can get hit on it, and then the next student knows they have to measure it up ready for their piece. Finally, things that should never be done. You should never overstress that blade. So if you're cutting a curve cut or you're cutting your rip cut, listen to the blade. If it starts whining and squealing, you got to give less pressure to what you're doing on that. Second thing to never do, never apply pressure on that brake before you stop the machine. Third thing to do, always clean up your mess. Never leave any material, any debris, any extra parts here, so that it's always ready for the next person. And finally, the last bit is never have your hands closer than 3 inches in that. If you're cutting a material, your hands should never be up here. It's not a scroll saw. So you got to keep your hands further apart, because it is a larger tool using for a larger material. Finally, things that always should be done. Always have your PPE on, your safety glasses are required, your hair up, your sleeves, follow all those rules, and then your blade guard set all the way down, and you'll be ready to be safe in the shops. Have fun with the bandsaw.